I think we have to talk first about the first major hurricane to be coming to the United States since Katrina. This is now when they say major, I don't want everybody who lived through Sandy to not think that that felt major, but the way that the National Weather Service talks about it, a hurricane at of level 3 is major, and Sandy, for all of its mayhem, was a level 1 hurricane. So of course,
was it level 1 when it hit land?
It was level 1 when it hit land, but that just shows you the power of these hurricanes. Harvey is headed for Texas right now, and don't worry, because we have a president who is off to Camp David, and when asked if he had any message for the people of Texas, he said, "Good luck." That's what the president said. He said, "Good luck," which, I mean, what else are you going to say? They're about to face a hurricane, but you could say, God, we're thinking about them. We're ready. I mean, he says he's going to.
He could have said, "Heck of a job, Brownie."
He could have said, "Heck of a job, Brownie." Well, so it would have been a heck of a job, Brocky, because Brock Long is the head. He's the administrator of FEMA. He's not the director, but there hasn't been a director per se since 2003. They call him the administrator. This is a serious, serious threat to the people of Texas, to the Gulf Coast. But it's also a story about how we might not be prepared, that this administration does not have the pieces in place, not just at FEMA, but for what happens afterwards. The EPA has cut so much under President Trump already that the EPA, who is responsible for the environmental cleanup when they go in there afterwards, is not necessarily sufficient as it stands right now to do that. And as Texas will tell you, there's a lot to be concerned about. But let's talk about Brock Long for a minute, because if you say, all right, Brock Long is now the administrator of FEMA, good thing, right? Let's look at what Brock Long has on his resume. Here he is. He was the hurricane program manager at FEMA from November 2001 to January 2006. 4 years, 3 months. That's according to Brock Long's LinkedIn. Well, you know what falls in that little span there of hurricane management?
Let me guess. A hurricane named Katrina.
That's exactly right. So you got the guy who oversaw federal emergency management, hurricane program management, during Katrina, who's there now. Now, that's not to say that he's incapable. I think that anybody would have learned lessons from what happened then. But let's go to what we talked about just a moment ago, about the preparedness and what there is to be prepared for. Perhaps most concerning for former government officials with experience dealing with major storms, as Brock Long, is the lack of leadership in key positions at the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, an agency perhaps less associated with hurricanes, but as we said, no less important when it comes to responding to the environmental disasters that they can bring. Further, EPA is the primary responder to petrochemical spills along with the state. Having a regional administrator in place provides crucial leadership. They don't have that there now. And the Texas Gulf Coast is home to nearly 1/3 of the United States refining capacity, making it an area especially prone to a storm-created environmental disaster. High winds or storm surge could breach active refineries or storage tanks, causing a release of chemicals or petrochemicals into the surrounding environment. When Katrina hit in 2005, the storm surge there inundated oil storage tanks, resulting in an estimated 8 million gallons of oil spilled into Louisiana. So, and Alabama and those waterways, when combined with Hurricane Rita, a Category 3 storm that hit the Texas Gulf Coast weeks after Katrina, the two storms caused an estimated 540 individual spills. So we can talk all we want about, oh God, there's never been a presidency like this. There's never been, but when the real stuff hits home, when it matters what's going on in our politics in Washington, in this administration, adept, it seems, at very little, cannot even put the manpower or woman power in place there to have this readiness for after the storm. This isn't during the storm. This is after the storm. How do we countenance this? What then do we do?
Yeah. So. For those who watch the show or who watch the Aggressive Progressives,
what's that?
It's the best show on the network.
Oh, okay.
Jimmy and I often talk about the failings of the Democratic Party and how so many times they are, too close or very similar to the Republican Party. But here is where there's a big difference. The Republicans don't believe in government. They don't believe in science. They don't want the government to have an active role in these kind of areas, whereas the Democrats do, and they are much better prepared for storms and cleanup and preparedness. I mean, I would argue that that the damage from these kind of storms, with the global climate change, is a far greater threat to our society and our safety than terrorists. So Trump wasted all this time with all the travel bans for all the different countries, and here we have an administration that is woefully unprepared to deal with natural catastrophes that we know are going to happen. It's a matter of when, but we know they're going to happen over and over again. And the notion that we don't have enough leaders in place to deal with the initial storm itself and the inevitable cleanup afterwards is just appalling. But I mean, Scott Pruitt, think about this guy. I mean, he is a person who now runs the EPA, who has for the longest time advocated for the dismantling and abolishing of the EPA. So he is in there right now fighting with career EPA administrators and other employees of the EPA. His whole role there is to gut it from the inside out.
Right, and so many people, the people that were supposed to stay there, because of the budget cuts and because of what they say is an impossible working environment with the administration, they've resigned and quit. So there are all these empty spaces, empty seats that they're not filling right now because they want to bring the budget of the EPA down. Now the EPA, if you have philosophical differences, if this goes back to the moronic James Inhofe climate change argument, and you want to gut the EPA, that's one thing. That's crazy, but that's not crazy dangerous. Well, it is crazy dangerous. I should correct myself. It is not immediately crazy dangerous because right now you have an empty EPA that's not going to be able to do. Hopefully they'll be able to, but the fear is they're not going to be able to do the cleanup and the proper remediation afterwards.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe you can remember, but in 1992,
I try and do that a lot.
There was Hurricane Andrew. Or maybe it was 91, slow response by the George Herbert Walker Bush administration. A lot of people say that's why he lost to Bill Clinton, was because of he lost Florida because
it was 92. It was summer of 92. Yeah,
their slow response to that Hurricane Andrew was what people credited for him losing Florida because of that. And you'd think that the Bushes would learn from that. They didn't. They put a horse trainer in charge of hurricane relief, and heck of a job, Brownie.
Not only that, then a Bush won the governorship of Florida a few years later anyway. So there's a short memory.
Very short memory. So, and Steve makes a good point that Democrats in general are more for government intervention and science and stuff like this, except, of course, we've seen Flint, Michigan still hasn't had clean drinking water since 2014. Barack Obama came in, drank a glass of water and left town. So our government has been failing a lot lately. It's going to continue to fail. And the only thing you can hope for is that so the last time the Republican administration faced Katrina and they failed miserably, we had a Democratic House, Democratic Senate, and Barack Obama became president. Now, how much Katrina had to do with that? I say a lot. So this is again an opportunity.
To that point, Jimmy, after Katrina hit, George Bush's ratings fell below 40% and never recovered. Never recovered. He was in the 30s for the rest of his presidency.
And there was also a Democratic kind of a feeling that the Democrats were right. It was in 2004, John Edwards was out there, you'll remember Senator Edwards, saying that there are two Americas. And what Katrina did was it laid bare the fact that there were two Americas. Whatever happened to John Edwards, that argument endured, and that helped the Democrats win the White House that year. So the kind of the mood was changing because people were paying attention to that. But there was in the aftermath of that, and I mean, JR, how many of these stories have we covered here? Where a hurricane comes, there's lack of preparedness. Then there's the relief that it doesn't hit. But as we sat here and talked about Sandy, I mean, you saw the devastation. You saw the way that even Chris Christie at that time was responding. You're not.
That's the one I was going to bring up, Chris Christie and Sandy, right?
Yeah.
So that also people said gave Obama boosts because look at Chris Christie working with this Democratic president and boosting his numbers and trying to get some kind of nice with him when in reality it was trying to work with a way to maybe fix what was happening because. Obviously, no one really expected it to happen in that region. So I was actually wondering to the point where I was looking up exactly what happened again, because all these, again, I was mentioning this morning, there's hurricane season. So it's not like things should surprise you. It's just probably the devastation or the level of severity of these storms. Katrina even, I think Gustav was before it. That was worse. I think it was Gustav. I can't remember the names of these, but that was actually worse than Katrina. It's just the preparedness and then the what was set to contain these on the ground wasn't set. Yeah. So these things happen. It's just a matter of how much we respond to taking care of them once they do.
Right, and it's early to say, and hopefully it will not have the devastating effect, but already FEMA has said that to be prepared for that. It's too early to say what we've learned and haven't learned, but the mere fact that we don't have every seat filled in the aftermath and the work for the aftermath of this hurricane is unbelievable. To Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, Republican governor, who we rarely say a nice thing about because I rarely don't have one to say, he is saying that everybody who is seeking shelter will get shelter. It's hard to imagine that you have to say this, but he's saying even illegal immigrants will get shelter in Texas. That you have to say it is unbelievable, but he's saying it, I think, is also important. So I guess it remains to be seen what happens. It's a news story that isn't a news story yet, but I think that one of the things that we go into this looking at, I mean, from our vantage point, is what's going to happen afterwards.
Yeah, and again, I just want to emphasize the point that government matters. You can't fight climate change by yourself. You can't fight against hurricanes by yourself.
Good point, yeah.
You need to mobilize, and you need to have government action to direct the tremendous amount of resources that are needed to house hundreds of thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, to move them to safer areas. I mean, you can't just do that alone. You can't create a charity to do that. You need the arm of the government to do this, and you have to believe in government services. You have to believe in science and the predictive power of science to know when. I mean, we already know, as Jared mentioned, we have a whole season of hurricanes. This happens every single year. I mean, and private industry takes into account for it. So if you go to the Gulf Coast in certain months, it's cheaper because you're going there during hurricane season. It's more expensive during high season. Like, we know this is happening. So why are we surprised when there's a big hurricane on its way and oh my God, we're not prepared? It's unacceptable. We need to have better leadership from our government than what we get right now.
And at TYT, of course, we're going to hold their feet to whatever fire we can. Even this aggressive, progressive show probably will. And just keep watching, because we're going to be talking about everything that they aren't doing, and of course, citing what did go well. And maybe Brock Long, hopefully Brock Long, is better than Brownie, who we miss so dearly.
If you like this clip of the Young Turks, there's a whole live 2-hour show, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern every day, and you can download it or stream it and watch it without ads if you become a member. TYTnetwork.com/join.